What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another video. In this video, we are going to be recapping the second day of March Madness Sweet 16. So we had a lot of good games on the second day of the Sweet 16. I would say it was probably a little bit more competitive than the first day of game, because the first day of games, really the only competitive game was Texas and Purdue. That was really it. But yesterday, man, wow. We had a lot of thriller games. St. John's, Duke, Michigan State, UConn, Tennessee, Iowa State was pretty competitive for most of that game. So we're going to talk about the four games from yesterday, which wrapped up the Sweet 16. We already have the Elite 8 all ready to go. We'll talk about those games, which will be played today as I'm recording this video, and on Sunday, the 30th of March. So we'll talk about all those games and more. But make sure you guys hit that like, hit that subscribe for more March Madness content. I will be making a women's video talking about how that has been shaping up a little bit later today. So, first game we're going to talk about is going to be the St. John's Red Storm versus the Duke Blue Devils. And while this was a good game, I expected this game to be pretty good. Because St. John, they're always a really good competitive team. They're always a fierce team. Usually under the radar, kind of an underrated team for most. I mean, people had them losing to Kansas, but I had St. John's up into the Sweet 16 and then losing to Duke Blue Devils. So far, this side has been looking pretty good. Duke Blue Devils, wow, we know they struggled in the first round against Siena. They looked relatively good in their second round matchup against TCU, and now they beat a really good St. John's team by 5 points. And to be fair, St. John's was pretty much in control for most of that game, right? I mean, they had the lead at half, then they felt pretty good early in the second half, but then Duke, with a little bit more experience, Duke ends up winning there. They move on to the Elite 8. Obviously, you know, it's a Duke Blue Devils. They're a team that I feel like it's not a March Madness until they at least make the Elite 8. So we'll see what they do. We'll see if they can make the Final Four, as they're going to be having to face UConn there in that 1v2 matchup. But the Duke Blue Devils, man, they look good. They move on to the Elite 8 for another season. And you take a look at some of the points, right? You had 22 points from Cameron Boozer, 25 from Isaiah Evans, 11 from Caleb Foster. So it was a pretty big day for Duke, for some of the big guys there. For St. John's, you had like 17 from Zuby Ejiofor, 13 from Dylan Mitchell, 15 from Bryce Hopkins, 12 from Ruben Prey. And Duke, they move on in a pretty competitive game. Then we had Michigan beating Alabama. Very competitive first half. Like how I expected this game, but the second half was all Michigan. I expected Michigan to win. Michigan is just more of a dominant team. Alabama's not a bad team, but I just feel like they're not consistent. They don't have as much talent as the Wolverines. And it was definitely evident in that second half when Michigan outscored Alabama 43-28. As the Michigan Wolverines will move on to the Elite 8 as the 1 seed. You had 35 points there from Finlon Jr. for Alabama, 15 from Reitzel. So not bad, 10 from Sherrill. But for Michigan, 23 from Lindenborg, 17 from Cadu, 16 from Roddy Gill Jr., 17 from Trey McKinney. As the Michigan Wolverines, take a look at kind of how they made it. Obviously, they destroy Howard by 20-plus points. Then you beat a pretty fierce St. Louis team. And then now you beat Alabama. So Michigan, they've had a pretty, I'll say, dominant stretch of games heading into the Elite 8. So we'll see if that can transpose. Honestly, Michigan's been playing a lot better than I've expected them to play. I expected Michigan to win these games, but not as dominant and not as like clear-coded. But man, Michigan, they're actually showing that they are hungry, they're dominant, they are ready, they want to win the championship. Okay? Alabama, it was a good ride for them. I mean, you beat Hofstra in the first round. Hofstra was a pretty good team entering the bracket. You beat Texas Tech. Well, Texas Tech was kind of a, I'll say, overinflated team, I would say. But you destroy Texas Tech, and then you kept it competitive with Michigan for a little over half. But it was just not enough at the end. Then we had this game. We had the 2v3 Connecticut Huskies, UConn versus Michigan State. This was probably the game of the day. It was a 4-point win there for the UConn Huskies as the 2 seed. This was a game that was basically a pick'em game for most of people's brackets, just because these are just two dominant teams. You have Tom Izzo, Michigan State, versus Hurley and the UConn Huskies. Just two veteran coaches, two veteran organizations who are always dominating in the March Madness scene. But UConn as a 2 seed, they get the better end of the coin and they win. I mean, UConn, they were up big at the end of the first half. Second half, they kind of kept that momentum. Michigan tried coming back late, but UConn just had such a big lead at the end of the first half that they ended up winning this whole ball game by 4 points. Michigan State, suck to see them go. I mean, you had a really, really nice stretch of games. You destroyed North Dakota State. That's what you were supposed to do. You beat a pretty good Louisville team, and then you kept it competitive with UConn. I mean, Michigan State, I mean, it's not the way you want to end in the Sweet 16, but at least you get eliminated by a good team like UConn, who, while people were saying that this might have been the weakest 2 seed, which they probably were, they've won a lot of big games, right? You beat Furman, which was not a pretty win, but then you beat a good UCLA team, and now you beat a good Michigan State team, but now you got to take on Duke, and we'll see how that game shakes up tomorrow. Then we have Tennessee versus Iowa State. This game ended pretty late, but yeah, the Tennessee Volunteers as the 6th seed beat the Iowa State Cyclones. I did have Iowa State in the Final Four, but the problem is Iowa State, they are experiencing some injuries, which kind of made them play really flat against the Volunteers. The Tennessee Volunteers, very, very good team. Probably one of the best SEC teams, if not the best SEC team this year. As they move on to the Elite Eight, they get a nice 14-point victory over the Iowa State Cyclones. I mean, the Cyclones, they were one of the favorites to make the Elite Eight, the Final Four, before entering the bracket, but because of all the injuries that were accumulated throughout the bracket, throughout the tournament, Iowa State Cyclones, they lost a lot of talent, a lot of, perimeter defense, a lot of guard talent, and they just didn't have enough firepower to win this game. Mind you, very competitive first half, but the second half, that's when the talent really was shown, where Tennessee really started heating up and really showed dominance in that game. But Tennessee moves on to the Elite Eight. So that's kind of a recap there of the 4 games yesterday. But now I gotta take a look here at the games coming up. Iowa, Illinois, gonna be the game at 6:09 Eastern. Should be a good game. Obviously, didn't really expect Iowa to be in this Elite Eight situation. But I mean, hey, they destroyed the number 1 seed Florida Gators, so they can beat the number 3 seed Illinois. But Illinois, they've been playing really, really good basketball. And then at 8:49 p.m. Eastern, you got Purdue and Arizona, the 1v2 matchup. Almost a cookie cutter Elite Eight finish over there on that region. I think Arizona is the most dominant team right now in basketball. I think Arizona will win this game by 10 or 15 points. That's how dominant I think Arizona is. Purdue's a phenomenal team, but I think Arizona is just so much better than Purdue. I still think Arizona wins by at least 10 points. That's my prediction. Tennessee and Michigan, that's going to be tomorrow at 2:15 p.m. Eastern. So Tennessee, Michigan should be a pretty good game. I think Michigan wins that game. Tennessee's been playing really good basketball. You beat Iowa State. But I think Michigan, a lot of people have Michigan in the Final Four as the 1 seed. I think Michigan will end up winning that game. But don't be surprised if Tennessee comes out and wins this. And then you have Duke and UConn. That's going to be the 5:05 p.m. Eastern game. I still think Duke beats UConn. I think UConn is not a very strong 2 seed. But it's going to be a competitive game because it is a 1v2. I think it's going to be more competitive than Purdue and Arizona, in my opinion. So you have 3 1 seeds in the Elite Eight, 2 2 seeds, 1 3 seed, and a 6 and a 9 seed in the Elite Eight. And then obviously we have the Final Four up, going to be on Saturday, next Saturday. Just so y'all know. So if you take a look at the official bracket, Duke and UConn over here on this side of the bracket, Arizona, Purdue, Iowa, Illinois, and Michigan and Tennessee. And then winners move on to the Final Four. So Arizona, Purdue, winner will take on Michigan, Tennessee. Duke, UConn, winner will take on Iowa, Illinois. So Duke and UConn, they really got an easy trip to the championship. I mean, Duke, UConn, they have to play against each other, but if they win, they have to take on Iowa, Illinois. And while I think Illinois is a good team, I don't think they're as strong as Duke and UConn as a 1 and 2 seed. So whoever wins between Duke and UConn, you could basically put them in the championship because I think they're going to be favorites over Iowa, Illinois. Now, over here, Arizona, Purdue, I think whoever wins this will easily beat Tennessee and maybe Michigan. Michigan, I don't think is that strong. They were probably the 3rd 1 seed. I think Arizona was the strongest 1 seed. Then it was Duke. Then it was Michigan. Then it was Florida. Florida got eliminated in the second round. We saw that. Michigan, I think they've had a little bit of the easier side of things. I mean, Arizona had a pretty easy bracket, very easy region. Duke had a very tough bracket. I mean, you can't really say much when they kept it competitive with Siena, but like, having to play St. John's in the Sweet 16, that's a tough matchup, and they were able to win that game by 5 points, control most of the possession. I mean, it was a pretty good game. But yeah, that's kind of how the bracket is shaking up.